Hey guys, Kyle back again, here to talk UFC this time. Specifically talking about the main card, UFC 259, that just happened this weekend, headlined by Israel Adesanya taking on Jan Blachowicz for the light heavyweight championship. Just going to give a quick rundown on the main card, my thoughts on each fight, and of course, obviously, ending with the main event. So, first, the card started off with Alexander Usyk versus Thiago Santos. Pretty uneventful fight, if I'm honest. I think even the commentators were kind of saying that it was just kind of blasé. Neither guy really kind of going for it, so to speak. Not a whole lot to say. Usyk did win via decision, unanimous decision. Not a whole lot to say. Santos, obviously, he has had that big knee surgery, so I think Rogan kind of said his explosiveness and his ability to kind of close the distance didn't quite look the same. So, and I mean, I haven't seen enough of his fights to say myself, but certainly didn't look terribly it didn't look like the same guy that, really pushed John Jones. So, yeah, maybe it's just because his knees are still kind of recovering, or maybe, hopefully, maybe he'll never be the same. We'll see. But yeah, kind of a fight. Not a whole lot to say. So next you had Islam Makhachev versus Drew Dober. Now this fight was big. Makhachev took basically a year off because of COVID, or did take a year off literally because of COVID. And he looked tremendous. Dober is a great athlete, a great striker, super explosive. Been on a pretty good tear as of late. And man, Makhachev obviously coming from the Khabib camp. I mean, Khabib's literally in his corner, and he looks the part. I mean, literally looks like him, even with the same chin strap beard, and it's scary. Honestly, I think his stand-up even looks a little bit better what little we've seen. So it's kind of scary. But yeah, he won a submission arm triangle choke. Looked really good, man. It's scary to think. I mean, it's the same division. It's lightweight, so it's the same division that Khabib just retired from. We'll see if he stays retired. But it's almost you start to kind of think that Khabib retired because this guy's coming. I'm not saying Khabib's obviously afraid, and Khabib had his reasons with his family and his father passing away to retire. But if both those guys are going to be in lightweight, it's obviously they would be on a collision course, because I think this guy is certainly ready for a top 10, if not even maybe top 5, but it just depends what the UFC wants to do. But yeah, Islam Makhachev is certainly a prospect to watch, just from that Khabib mold. Obviously, the same type of, he's a Sambo gold medalist. I mean, he's the real deal. And he's going to be a tough matchup for about anybody, in my opinion. So yeah, so Islam Makhachev beats Drew Dober via unanimous decision. Very one-sided, literally. So not much else to say on that. Interesting to see kind of where Islam goes from here. Next fight. Okay, so this is where we get to the kind of the main events, if you will. It was 3 title fights on the top. So we had Aljamain Sterling defeating Peter Yan via disqualification. So this is interesting. It's the first time we've ever, I believe, had a title change hands or change via disqualification. The fight's going pretty good. I mean, Sterling comes out really energetic. Definitely high energy and high volume. Really moving good. Staying in Peter. Sorry if I'm saying his name wrong. I'm just going to call him Petre or Peter. Staying in his face. Staying in Jan's face. And looked good. But then I think it was in the second round, you see Aljamain slowing down. And then Jan obviously started taking over because his boxing is so elite. And he's so calm. I mean, a lot of the times you almost think when Jan's just covering up and Sterling definitely had some moments where it's he might, he definitely he damaged him a little bit there, but he just stays covered up, and I think sometimes people kind of think that, he's in trouble, he's turtling, if you will, and I think he's just, like I said, he's a boxer, he's an elite boxer, so I think he's almost just kind of, keeping his hands up and saying, okay, wear yourself out, because I know you're going to slow down eventually. And that's when I'll start taking care of business. And sure enough, he was. As of the third and fourth round, Jan was definitely asserting himself and becoming. It was the fight was getting away from Sterling for sure. Jan was making it apparent that he was definitely going to take the fight, I would say, as it went to the championship rounds. So the controversy in the DQ comes from at a moment whenever Sterling's footing was really kind of goofy as far as keeping his footing. He was falling a lot. I don't think anybody else noticed that, but I certainly did. It seemed like he just would fall a lot, and then he'd end up in that that awkward situation in UFC, in MMA where he's on the ground The other guy's standing there and he's kind of like kicking at his knees or kicking at him, and the other guy's debating whether to jump in there and try to get ground position and whatnot. But one of these times, or in the fourth round, Sterling is on the ground and ends up in all fours, 4 points down position, and Jan's standing towards his head, kind of has his hands on his head, and obviously you're kind of thinking, okay, don't knee him obviously because it's illegal, right? You can't have the 3 points of contact. And the referee, you can hear the referee saying down, he's down, he's down. Of course, Jan's Russian and maybe didn't understand him clearly, but I'm sure he knows the word down, right? I mean, I'm sure he's learned enough English in MMA or UFC to understand that. And sure enough, while Sterling's, I believe it's just one of his hands are down, but it's 3 points of contact. When his hand's down, Jan just knees him right in the side of the head. And, it was a flush shot, like right to the temple side of the head region. And not good. I immediately kind of thought that, of course, the ref steps in because it's illegal and stuff like that. And they're going to give Sterling the quote-unquote 5 minutes to recover or whatever it is. But, it's apparent that, regardless of what you think, if Sterling was playing it up or anything, and I'm not saying he was by any means because it was a very flush, hard knee to the side of the head. It was apparent to me, and the commentators all agreed, that this fight should not continue in any certain circumstance, right? Clearly, it was a flush shot, and there was no way Sterling was going to probably be the same, at least in that round, if not probably the rest of the fight. And like I said, the fight was getting away from him anyways, but after that, illegal shot, it was just clear that fight needed to stop. But the catch was that the ref made it clear he was saying down, down, he's down, as in basically don't strike him because he's down. You can't strike him in the head or with the knee right now. And sure enough, Jan did, so the ref ruled that it was it was on purpose basically, or it was a DQ, basically. So it wasn't like an accidental, hit to the crotch or anything like that, nothing to that nature. Where if Sterling says he can't continue, then it's a no contest. In this situation, since the ref said clearly that, I communicated to the fighter he's down, and he did have time. It wasn't like it was all quick, happened real fast. It was like Sterling was down for a good moment, and then Jan just decided to knee him. And apparently after the fight, they said that Jan's corner was yelling in Russian to knee him, or to say, they were saying yes when Jan was asking if he should knee, and they were saying yes apparently. And so then he kneed him. I don't know. It's jumbled. I'm sure there'll be a developing story coming out of this. But long story short, in a fight where Sterling was, to me at least, was the fight was definitely going Jan's way, and then unfortunately, by no fault of Sterling, gets an illegal knee to the head. Now the title goes to Sterling via DQ, and it's the first time ever in the UFC that's happened. So nobody wanted to see that, including Sterling. He was really upset at it. Maybe at his, I think maybe he felt like the fight was getting away from him a little bit, but obviously the fight was still happening, so you never know what could happen. But then for it to go down like that, and he even put the belt down after Dana put it on him, so he definitely didn't feel like it was justified. But there's no fault of Sterling; he didn't do anything wrong. All the faults on Jan in the situation, and clearly I think he got to run it back, obviously. So I would expect to see a rematch between those two, and maybe Sterling needs to figure out a way to kind of keep that energy or manage that energy better that he had in the first round. Because in the first round, he looked good. He definitely was in Jan's face. And like I said, Jan kind of turtles in a way that makes people think maybe he's in trouble. I think that's a little deceptive sometimes. But I think Sterling was actually getting to him some, though, too, whenever he had that high energy. So I would be interested in the rematch if Sterling keep that energy or maybe manage the energy a little bit better. I'd be definitely interested in that rematch. Clearly I think it must happen. So, all right. So next we had Amanda Nunes defending her title versus Megan Anderson. Not a whole lot to say on this one, obviously. This is one of those fights. Amanda Nunes is so dominant and so great. Not good. She's phenomenal. She's a phenomenal fighter. Not a female fighter. She's a phenomenal fighter in general. There's no need to class it by gender. She's phenomenal. And she is so far ahead of her peers and because Megan Anderson's been on a bit of a tear lately. I think she's won maybe 3 straight. But Amanda is just so far ahead that her fights are becoming situations where people, if she's not accompanying other big fights on the card, people are probably thinking, well, I'll catch her fight on Twitter. They're so quick. Or TikTok, it's just, she's so dominant, and it's such a challenge, I think, for the UFC. I think that's why the UFC probably had her sandwiched in this card that was pretty stacked, because I think they're probably realizing that she's so dominant and so great. And this is nothing of this is Amanda's fault. She's amazing. She just needs to keep doing what she's doing. But the UFC probably realizes they have a bit, not a problem, but a situation in their hands where it's like, well, if she's on top of the card by herself, we have to convince people to spend $70. And like I just said, are they going to want to spend $70 if it's her and then no other title fights or whatever? And then if they're thinking in their head, well, I'll just catch it on Twitter or TikTok or whatever right after, because it's going to be so quick. So, but I mean, it's not Amanda's fault. I mean, she's just amazing. The UFC's challenge is to find a competitor for her, so I don't know who that's going to be. I mean, to me, the only fight I'm really truly interested in watching her fight next is versus Valentina in some kind of, going down in weight class, obviously, but that's the only person I think that interests me in watching her fight next. Like I said, she's a Hall of Famer already, clearly the best ever to do it, and she deserves every single bit of praise she gets. It's just that she really, honestly, I think she almost needs that dancing partner, that peer, to step up and challenge her. And kind of almost like with Anderson back in the day, not counting the Damian Maia fight, but when Chael finally stepped up and pushed him and almost won that fight, that elevated Anderson. And so I think Amanda would benefit even more from just if somebody could step in and just push her. Because right now it's just, it's almost like they're picking fans from the crowd. I mean, there's no crowd right now, but, if there was, it's almost like they're picking a fan from the crowd to come in and fight her. It's just, that's literally the way it looks, the optics of it. And I'm not trying to bash Megan Anderson at all. She's a great fighter. It's just the way it looks. I mean, it's crazy. It's how good Amanda is, a testament to Amanda. So, okay, the main event. So we had Jan Blachowicz defending his light heavyweight title versus Israel Adesanya. Israel going up a weight class to fight Jan. Israel obviously has been pretty dominant at middleweight, kind of cleaned out the division, has cleaned out the division. Light heavyweight, Jan obviously hasn't had a lot of fights there. He just won the title, and this was actually his first defense, I believe, against a middleweight champion. So the fight was weird, and even the commentators said as they came in, they walk-ins and introductions, Israel was much more reserved than usual. Jan the same. It almost looked like a glorified sparring match. Maybe Jan's more reserved in general anyways, but Israel obviously, usually he dances on the way to the octagon and just real, vibrant and just real into it and stuff. I'm not saying he wasn't into it per se, but just his personality, he just didn't seem all that excited about it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I'm sure he was into the fight obviously, but he just seemed more reserved, I guess is what I'm saying. Well, it certainly wasn't coming out and doing the choreographed dance like he had a couple fights ago. So, yeah, the fight starts and it's pretty even. It's really apparent quick. Israel's obviously faster, which everybody expected. Jan's responding to literally every feint that Israel throws. Jan goes through some clinches and stuff early on. Israel does a pretty good job of defending him and, not taking any damage and whatnot. On the feet, it was pretty, and I guess that's what I'll take away from this fight, at least in the early on, was that Jan, if you go by the strike counts and whatnot, and significant strikes, Jan held his own. Was holding his own. And it certainly wasn't some lopsided affair like I think a lot of people thought, including myself. I thought Israel would actually come out and kind of piece him up because of the speed advantage and just the techniques he has over Jan. But on the feet, it was just kind of, it was pretty even. I never felt like Jan was certainly outstriking Israel. I would say maybe Israel was doing a little bit more damage just because the front leg kicks, because those seemed like pretty significant. Israel was doing pretty good with those. But overall, it was relatively even on the feet, which was kind of surprising. And then as the fight went, I think when we got in the fourth round, the championship rounds, both guys seemed kind of tired of Jan especially, but Jan just started going hard for the takedown, and in the fourth round, he got it. And with Israel going up a weight, Israel weighed in 4 pounds under the 205 limit for 205 cutoff for light heavyweight. So obviously, and he made that apparent leading up to the fight that he was not going to try to bulk up. He was just going to basically not cut, So, and once Jan actually got the takedown and ended up on top and, half guard or side mount or whatever, just his weight, because I'm sure at the night of the fight, I'm sure Jan weighed at least 30 pounds more, if I were to guess. And Israel just couldn't get up. And Jan, he tried to do some damage, but really no damage was really nothing significant. There's really no significant damage done to either guy throughout the entire fight. So then, the fifth round starts. Israel's kind of on the feet. And, like I said, throughout the whole fight, I felt like Israel, you could tell watching the fight on the feet, Israel was the better striker, but it wasn't like he was piecing Jan up like people thought he would. That's kind of how I would describe it. So Then Jan's breathing real hard and everything, but Jan still just goes for that takedown again, double legs it, and I don't know if Israel was truly that tired, but Israel's kind of doing he was kind of like waving around like he was exhausted. I don't know if he was trying to do like kind of like a rope-a-dope type thing, like, oh, I'm exhausted, but then he tries to get comfortable and he comes in and hits him good. But while he was doing kind of that staggery, I'm tired type stature, Jan shot on him and got him down again in the 5th round, and this time had a little more success on top, got in full mount and stuff and did some damage. Nothing real terribly significant, but it was, he definitely, I'll say this, Jan deserved to win the fight. Jan Blachowicz defeats him, the unanimous decision, hands Israel Adesanya's first loss of his career. He's 20-1 now. Jan won the fight, especially because those last two takedowns, the 2 takedowns in the last 2 rounds, 1 each round, where he just stayed on top and Israel couldn't get up from bottom, because I think the weight difference was a big deal. So yeah, it wasn't. I don't have any quarrel with the decision. I'm just more kind of just the fight was just kind of blah. I think people kind of went into it thinking, okay, obviously the wrestling by Jan could be a thing because of the weight difference. But I think people kind of thought, well, Jan's known for knocking people dead as of late. Israel's known for piecing up people and just making them look silly because he's the best counter striker I think in the UFC. It'd be hard to argue otherwise. And we just didn't see a whole. Like I said, yeah. It wasn't. It kind of reminded me what I thought of. It was like when Israel fought Yoel Romero. It reminded me of that fight a little bit, where on the feet it was like, okay, Israel's probably winning the fight. It was like that fight, except had Yoel Romero went for some takedowns late to try to win the fight, which he didn't, obviously, because that fight was really monotonous and boring. But because Yoel Romero just kind of stayed away the whole time. It was kind of like that fight in a way. It reminded me of that fight, except Jan decided to go for takedowns and try to get top position and just smother Izzy. And he did, and he succeeded, and he deserves full credit for it. So, yeah, I think Israel, obviously he went up a class, and I think the big picture thing here, without talking too much about it, is I think it's pretty apparent both these weight classes are just in a tough spot. Israel had basically cleaned out middleweight. I think the next fight for him might be a rematch with Whitaker. Kevin Holland is coming up, and I think he's a big-time test for Izzy, but he's still kind of coming up, like I said. So the middleweight division's just kind of, that's why Israel went up, right? Because he was looking for a challenge, and middleweight didn't have anything for him at the time. And then light heavyweight is just, since Jones now obviously is bulking for his heavyweight fight, or heavyweight debut, is just really barren right now. So both of these, the middleweight and light heavyweight, to me just seem rough shape, and I think that's kind of why these two came together. Maybe Israel decided maybe go be the champ because he didn't have anybody in middleweight, and then maybe if he would have beaten Jan, well, now he can fight these light heavyweight guys. I don't know. It obviously didn't happen, and Israel's gonna have to go back down to middleweight and just, like I said, either rematch Whitaker or maybe wait for Holland, because he looks really promising, and seems like it'd be a really good fight, right? So yeah, then Jan, I don't know. It seems like I think Jan now has said that Glover Teixeira is who he thinks deserves the next title fight, which, no disrespect to Glover, but it's like if that's where light heavyweight's at. Jan Blachowicz is going to fight Glover Teixeira for the light heavyweight title. I'm not trying to be disrespectful at all, but that's where light heavyweight's at. So these two divisions, I think, are just kind of in a position right now where they're really needing to have some prospects kind of rise up to make them kind of interesting again. So we'll see. But yeah, so that's my thought on the card. Really weird card. I was pretty hyped for it. I can't lie. Obviously the main 3 fights were what we were, kind of hyped for. But honestly, at the end, it kind of almost felt like the undercard outperformed it away, because the top 3 fights, you had the controversial finish with Jan and Sterling, where Jan loses his belt because of an illegal knee that he did, and he deserved to be disqualified. But still, it's like nobody wants to see a belt change hands like that. So that fight was weird. And then Nunes, being an all-time great, just beats Megan Anderson like she's never trained hardly a day in her life, which isn't true, obviously, because Megan Anderson's really good. And then, yeah, Jan versus Israel just wasn't quite, I don't think, at least in my opinion, the fireworks, or at least wasn't the fight that I think many people thought. And sometimes, with fighters, it's almost kind of like a chemistry experiment, right? Like certain fighters go well and are combustible when they get together, and it makes for a great fight. Other fighters, sometimes when they come together, even if you think on paper it's going to be great, just fizzles. So I think that's kind of how that main event was to me, at least. Maybe if it had a crowd, maybe it'd been different. I don't know. So yeah, that's my thoughts. So yeah, recaps. Now we got the next one, the UFC 260, March, I believe it's 27th. Got the heavyweight fight on there, big title fight. Looking forward to that one big time. Definitely interested to see Francis take on Stipe in the rematch. Real excited to see where that heavyweight division goes. I think John Jones is waiting in the wings for that one, so I'll definitely probably talk about that, the aftermath of that one, and give my thoughts. And then we have Alexander Volkanovski versus Ortega, which I think is a really underrated fight. I think Ortega's I don't know if he's an underdog. I haven't really looked at the odds, but I'm picking Ortega to surprise some people big time in that one. So yeah, I'll definitely probably talk about the aftermath of that one. So if you like what you heard here, please hit the like button, subscribe. Plan on doing some more videos soon. I know it had a bit of a break in here, but plan on getting back at it. So appreciate you. Peace.